We're 15 months into the Albanese government that was elected on a small target strategy, and yet there's a vast reshaping of Australian life underway. When you look at the big picture, in just a little over a year, there's been drastic reform in many areas that are fundamental to our way of life. Labor is embarking on radical industrial relations reform that the business community and employer groups oppose. There's superannuation reform. Labor's presiding over a big Australia with a massive immigration intake. It's changing Australia's long-standing bipartisan response to Israel. It's forging ahead with fast renewable energy transition. It has overhauled the RBA with a dual employment and inflationary mandate. And this CFMEU wants a union rep on the RBA board. Plus, there's the proposed misinformation laws, clearly impinging on freedom of speech. And that's not to mention the voice to Parliament. These are big nation-changing policies that Labor's driving through. It's far from the small target agenda Albanese took to the last election. Now, we look at what's underway in every portfolio, and you can't help but wonder, are we moving too fast without taking a breath to check if this overall picture is actually where we want to go as a nation? On the immigration intake, this week's intergenerational report will outline how Australia's population is on track to surpass 40 million people within 4 decades. The Sydney Morning Herald reports today that Australia was expected to have 25 million residents by 2042, but it reached that population in June 2019. The Herald writes that since the then Treasurer Peter Costello unveiled the first intergenerational report in 2002, the nation's population has swelled beyond expectations. Treasurer Jim Chalmers will also confirm the financial outlook will be tougher as a slowdown in productivity growth translates into a hit to living standards and the size of the country's economic output. Then, on the push by the CFMEU to have a union rep on the board of the RBA, well, Peter Dutton says this would be disastrous.
I mean, the CFMEU officials in there, literally hundreds, have been before the courts, have been involved in all sorts of allegations. They're the most radical of the unions, and the disproportionate influence of the unions within the Albanese government is quite remarkable.
On Israel, Penny Wong articulated just yesterday how great the change in Labor's position is. So great that it makes up for not recognising a Palestinian state immediately, although she hasn't ruled that out either.
Those who would want you to declare a Palestinian state might wonder why you're not right now.
Sure, and what I'd say is we have taken the last 15 months. I think you'll see whether it's in returning Jerusalem to a final status issue, in our rebalancing of our votes, making them more consistent in the UN context, or the return to a more centrist and nomenclature in relation to occupied Palestinian territories and the recognition that settlements are illegal, which is in great part a response to events on the ground that we are seeing this year. What you'll see is consistency in how we approach this issue.
And the Albanese government's proposed misinformation laws are so restrictive, so dangerous, that even the left-wing media union has come out against them. The MEAA points out that there's a long history of important social movements that are considered disruptive or harmful by governments, and yet this could be censored under the new laws. The union is also concerned about government content itself being excluded from the misinformation laws. They say in the Australian today, their submission says, it is simply unreasonable that the view of governments be protected from the reach of this bill's definition of misinformation, and paves the way for government to politicise valid criticisms of it while engaging in misinformation of its own. Already content on The Voice is being censored, as we spoke about on Thursday. The Voice is a topic where every Australian has a right to have their say. That's why we're having a referendum. But yet we're starting to see tech giants censoring the No campaign. And they're doing this after Anthony Albanese and Linda Burney attacked the No campaign over misinformation. Facebook is censoring content from the No campaign, including from my colleague Peter Credlin, who's argued that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is more than one page, and she says it in fact runs to 26 pages. This was labelled false and misinformation and censored, removed from Facebook in an extreme and shocking move, even though this exact claim that the Uluru Statement from the Heart runs for more than one page was made on numerous occasions by the Uluru co-author, Professor Megan Davis. Listen to this, and you haven't heard this before, listen to this from Megan Davis at the Adelaide Writers' Festival in 2020.
Can you actually describe the statement physically for us, for people who haven't had the benefit of seeing it? Because it's not just like a bit of A4 paper like this, is it?
Well, so you're referring to the painting, yeah. No, the painting is quite an exceptional painting that was painted after the conference around the Uluru words and the signatures of the people at the convention. I think what's not really well known is that the Uluru Statement, if I just park the painting for one second, the most important thing about the Uluru Statement is it's actually an 18-page document. It includes the legal reforms and the arguments for the legal reforms, and it includes the stories, the truth-telling stories that each of the dialogues told about Australian history in their dialogues, and we pulled all that together in quite a lengthy Australian history, Aboriginal history of Australia, with the many phases from invasion to land rights to today. And so the Uluru Statement, the painting, I think, was something that we decided at the meeting, but really the Uluru Statement is a very important 18-page document that I say as a constitutional lawyer is a very important constitutional document because it really sets out for all Australians the logic for this reform.
So Megan Davis there clearly differentiating the one-page painting, as she calls it, from the rest of the documents that go on to support that painting, as she calls it. These are the clearest and strongest comments we've heard yet from Megan Davis, the Uluru co-author, that this is an 18-page document that includes legal reforms. She says, and you heard it there, it's a very important 18-page document. Let's just listen to that one sentence again.
But really the Uluru Statement is a very important 18-page document that I say as a constitutional lawyer is a very important constitutional document because it really sets out for all Australians the logic for this reform.
So Peter Credlin is right when she says that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is longer than just the one page, even if the actual signed document or painting is only one page itself. Yet Peter's views on this have been censored, while Albanese's haven't been. Well, Credlin is scathing about this in her Weekend Telegraph column. She says, and I quote, "But this obvious attempt to hide the fine print of a constitutional con job has just got much worse with the connivance of big tech." She says her Sky News editorial from August the 3rd highlighting the differences between the relatively benign one-page statement and the full Uluru agenda, once it became a political problem for the government, was blocked by Facebook on the grounds that fact-checkers disagreed with it. Politically inconvenient for Albanese and then labelled false by Facebook's fact-checkers from the RMIT University and the ABC. It is just astonishing. This is censorship like you'd see in China or North Korea. Is the Labor government really so worried about losing the referendum that the tech giants are censoring the other side? Not to mention that Albanese is signing Australia up to the Uluru Statement from the Heart when he hasn't even read it, as he admitted to Neil Mitchell last week.
Do you agree with most of what is said in those 25 pages?
I haven't read it.
You haven't read it?
There's 120 pages. Why would I? I know what the conclusion is.
So from freedom of speech to industrial relations legislation, from foreign policy on Israel to the higher immigration intake, the Albanese government is overseeing policies that will fundamentally change our country. There's no small target agenda here. But how can our Prime Minister engage in reform that changes the nation without understanding precisely what people are going through? Bob Hawke, Paul Keating, John Howard all drove significant reform and had to make tough decisions, but took the nation with them because voters felt understood. But Albanese, for all his working class credentials, doesn't seem to have a firm grasp on what battlers are dealing with right now. Now, some media commentators dismiss Albanese having no idea about the price of petrol as a gotcha question by Andrew Clennell. But actually, it's not, and it's much more than that. There's a cost of living crisis that's affecting every single Australian, some more than others. Some are struggling to feed their family, as we've heard from charities who've come on this program. Some children are going to school hungry. But the cost of living crisis is affecting everyone, except for the Prime Minister. He has a chauffeur. He drives around in a plush com car. He sits in the chairman's lounge eating free food and has spent $4 million on flights. Of course he doesn't know the price of petrol, a figure you and I wish we didn't know. But we think about the price as we stand there at the Bowser watching the dollar figure ticking higher and higher. To make matters worse, Albanese actually campaigned on the cost of living. And of course we want our leaders to be smart, and it doesn't matter if they're wealthy or not. But it does matter if they no longer understand what ordinary Australians are dealing with day to day. And Albanese's failure to nominate the price of petrol is unfathomable for any parent or business owner. And it makes it look like he's been a politician for so long that he's now completely lost touch with reality.
Pretty obvious during your conference speech that cost of living's front and centre for this government. I once stumped a PM over the price of petrol. Can you tell me what the price of petrol is roughly at the moment?
Oh, the price of, well, I don't go and fill up my car, but it was around about $1.80 last time I did.
Well, it's $2.10, $2.20 now.
Sure.
Is there anything you can do about it?
Well, that's about a global impact that it's had.